Kyle, we got about 10 minutes. Can you give us a good Liber Christo exegesis on the prodigal son and how it plugs in to the Catholic norms when it comes to healing and deliverance?
Oh, it's a really good question, and I think that the prodigal gives us something for everybody. At different times in our life, we've been every single character in the parable. We've even sometimes I've even felt like the fatted calf, slaughtered for someone else, slaughtered for someone else's pleasure. But as you unpack this thing, it has just layer after layer after layer of implication and application. So let's look at it from a standpoint of not the modernist homilies that we've all heard. Let's look at it from a more traditional level. So first of all, you're seeing what's called a pattern break, meaning the story opens with a behavior that is inconsistent with a station in life. So when the young man says, "Give me what is coming to me," then we can use our intuition. And this is not a huge leap. This is simply what we all know. So this younger son, is not behaving as a younger son should behave. So where is that influence coming from? Something is influencing him, either the world, himself, or the devil, or all three, are working in such a way that he goes to his father and says, "Give me what is coming to me." So he's not seeing that his behavior and his words are inconsistent with his station in life. And that's a huge point that most modernist priests skip over in their homilies. We call it pattern break. We want to say, all right, when is a wife not being a wife? When is a husband not being a husband? When is a son not being a son, et cetera, et cetera. The pastor should be keyed in on these things. And so, does the boy take counsel? Does he ask anyone? With whom is he receiving counsel? And I'm gonna say something pretty harsh right here, but it needs to be said. Quite often, Jesse, if you've raised children and you know what I mean by this. Quite often, a child in what they perceive to be crisis confides or goes to a priest, talks to a priest, and the priest gives advice without talking to the parent. An uncle will give advice without talking to a parent. When you erode the authority of a parent, this is something that is extremely uncharitable to do to a child. Now, I understand that there are abuses and various other things. That's not what I'm dealing with, what I'm talking about. We need to be very, very careful that when a boy comes to us and says, "My father told me this and this," what did he really say? What happens if I go and talk to your father? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So we can tell by the pattern break, this boy going to his father and saying, "Give me what's coming to me." Someone is in his ear. Somebody's talking to him that doesn't have his best interest. So that's point number one. Now, point number two is a subtlety where the father says, "Okay," and he gives him the things, but it's a few days before the boy leaves. Those few days are golden, because what happens is whenever you make up your mind to destroy a structure of right order, it's almost as if God hits the pause button and gives you time. Do you really want to do this? Do you really want to harm this relationship? This is that consideration which should come. This is the prick of conscience. The boy in the prodigal, he overrides the prick of conscience. His pride overrides it, and then he takes the possessions and goes. Once he leaves, now we get a indication of whose voice that may have been in his ear. And that is, we hear for the first time that his friends. And so he is the life of the party. He squanders everything. The demon is expert in tempting you to a sin, saying it will have no consequence. And then once you do the thing, he convinces you now cannot receive forgiveness. Let that sink in, because that's what happens here. Is the boy is convinced that he is beyond his father. He's beyond all these things. The demon has the world himself. They've all conspired to do this to the household. And he doesn't see that he has the full consequences, the full effect of his actions. Once it's squandered, he finds himself in the pig pen. Now, you'll notice that the father is not sending him messages or sending him a little money so he can keep his cell phone turned on in case he wants to call. He's not in any way, the father is not in any way being complacent with this boy's sin. He's interceding from a distance. And in this intercession from a distance, it is the prick of conscience prayer. It's the light of Christ prayer. You can imagine the father praying, Lord, let him see himself as you see him. And then suddenly we get this insight because it says, and he came to his senses. What made him come to his senses? There's almost a throwaway line. And this is what is the same in spiritual warfare. It's always amazing to me what pricks the conscience of the obstinate sinner. What is it? What event? What image? What thing pricks the conscience? What speaks to him? And we've had it in satanic ritualistic abuse victims. We've had it in some practitioners of horrible things. Something happens that pricks their conscience. And so in this particular case, in the parable in Luke, what happens is the boy says he is there feeding the pigs and he's starving to death because no one offered him anything and he's not going to steal. So he's saying, I'm all these things, but I'm not a thief. So there was his prick of conscience.
Wow.
I'm all these things, but I'm not that.
You got 2 minutes, Kyle. Go ahead.
All right. So then he comes to his senses and he comes home. When he returns, the father is watching for him, signs of his intercession, and the father welcomes him back. We know that portion of it, that coming back. But I want to draw your attention to something that most people miss, the fatted calf. A fatted calf is a very specific thing. He is ready. When you feed a calf toward that fatted level, area, time of slaughter, he's being fed for a specific purpose. That father had no reason to feed that calf. There's no festival on the horizon. His son is dead to him. This is his act of faith, is each and every day he goes and feeds a calf who's going to be ready in a very narrow window of time. You can almost imagine the father feeding the calf every evening, talking to the calf about his son, how much he desires his son to come home. And the older son up on the hill saying, look at that old fool down there feeding a fatted calf for a festival that will never happen. And so there's providence there. There's a demonstrative act of faith. There's all these things that are coming to bear in that parable. So thanks.
Wow. Kyle, you did a deep dive on this story. That was you're not going to get this in most parish homilies what you just gave right now.
Thanks be to God.
And all this plugs into the four-phase protocol, right?
It absolutely does. I mean, you can see the phases in here. There has to be this return. There has to be a prick of conscience. There has to be something moving in there. And then phase one is the trip to the house. Phase two is he's got to get cleaned up. He's got to put shoes on his feet, a robe, and a ring on his hand. Phase 3 is now he has to incorporate into the household, and there'll be members in the household that will oppose this. This is the older brother.
Mm. And ultimately he reorients his intellect and his will, and he's healed. He returns to the Father's house. That's what full healing is, returning back to God the Father's house, correct?
Absolutely. Well said.
Well, that's a wrap, my friend. Thank you so much, Kyle. Kyle, where can people hear you during the week?
www.monte, M-O-N-T-E, Christo, CHRISTO.net. Go there and register for Reclamation Theology.
Thanks a lot, my friend. We'll see you next time. God bless you. Keep it here on vmpr.org. We'll see you next time. Same Christ channel. God bless you. Keep the faith.